And President Aquino has called on typhoon victims to remain calm and patient even as the pace of distribution and the volume of aid has been gradually increasing in the past 3 days. At the same time, the president vowed that the government would not slack in its efforts until everything is normalized. The president made the statement as he led the distribution of relief goods to typhoon victims in the municipalities of Palo and Alangalang. Since arriving Sunday, landing first in Gian before proceeding to Tacloban City, the president had been going around the province to check into ongoing government efforts to bring vital aid to areas heavily affected by Super Typhoon Yolanda. While food distribution had seen great progress, the president saw the need to improve further as many areas had yet to be reached by relief goods.
Look at the first, you had these very strong storm surges. They knocked out power, they knocked out communications, and also all the roads had to be reopened. And I think it's a credit for just to our Minister for Public Works that the main supply routes were open, not just one of the supply routes, both have been opened, and not just for motorcycles, for instance, but actually for all of the trucks that are bringing all of this. The challenge is just for this region alone. 1.4 million people have to be fed every day. Nobody was geared up, for instance, the producers of the products that we're bringing in, be it the sardines, be it rice, reallocating all of the supplies from different regions back here. And so it's a simultaneous effort, collecting all of the relief goods, reopening all of the roads, trying to restore power in most areas, to restore communications, getting the necessary data, and of course the geography of the country is dependable.
But sir, how do you respond to the criticisms that your government reacted too slowly?
Well, I would like to ask these critics what else we could have done given the resources we do have and given the magnitude of the problem.
For example, I have spoken to people in Tacloban who have told me that they were without fresh water for a week, without food for a week, and they were getting no supplies. Is that an appropriate response?
Perhaps we should ask the first responders, which is the local government of Tacloban. The first responders will be giving us the necessary data to tell us what they cannot meet. And again, we have the disaster risk response of this country is geared towards the empowered local government unit, who is supposed to be provide the backbone for all of the assistance that comes from the national government. The national government comes in to augment that which the local government does not need. And unfortunately, in Tacloban's case in particular, the mayor himself almost became a victim of this, and we'd like to try and understand a bit of the shortcomings as something amounting to shock. A lot of the city councillors have not reported, and they're in a sense a unique case. 290 policemen, only 20 were around. So we have to admit, there was a breakdown in terms of government, and there was a cascading effect. But perhaps you pass through from Tacloban, you would pass through Palo, and you would notice that they're already stringing up the lines. You've seen the markets that are opening up. You've seen the farmers already drying the rice. So again, this is not the only region that was affected. This was the region that was most affected. But 1.4 million people to be fed, to be provided help simultaneously in multiple locations. It's not an easy task for any government.
But Mr. President, when you say that you want to understand the shortcomings of the municipal government and the local authorities, it sounds to some that you are saying the ultimate responsibility for this does not lie with you.
I'm sorry if I have to repeat myself.
Does the ultimate responsibility
eventually it does. I have general supervision over all. But again, the system has to rely on the local government unit which is already in place to provide the necessary information so that the adequate responses can be generated by the national government. So that's why I call it a backbone. When the backbone doesn't exist, what do you actually augment? The national government had to fill in so many roles. For instance, the lack of policemen. We had to bring in policemen from all across the country to augment that which was here, including the National Capital Region. Soldiers, for that matter, also from the neighboring province of Samar, the entire Samar Island. You had to clear the San Juanico Bridge to bring them in. You had to clear the airport to transport all of these people and initial relief, and just to establish some rudimentary form of communication. So, again, I would, to anybody who had a fair mind, perhaps one should visit or revisit other similar catastrophes anywhere in the world and tell us if we are. No, we're not saying we're perfect. We're not saying that it couldn't be improved. For instance, I've been tasking our Science and Technology Department to come up with a communication system that is more resistant to weather phenomena like that which struck us. Something that is not as dependent on external power sources. Something that does not rely on the cellular network. Something that we can rely on 24/7 and regardless of what the weather conditions are. So again, please, to those of to your viewers, go Google it and see how our responses compare with others of a similar magnitude.
A similar magnitude, you're talking presumably about Hurricane Katrina.
And others.
Do you think that was an appropriate response from the US government over Katrina?
Well, I'd rather not criticize the country that is helping us, amongst others. We had lessons learned from that experience, and I think we implemented it with to the furthest extent of our capacities. For instance, can we have a surge for aircraft? We have 3 C-130 aircrafts. We're under negotiations for an additional 2 more. How many helicopters actually do we have in the fleet? How many these large transport ships in the Navy can exist? And of course, we had another typhoon right after the big one that hit us. That disrupted, again, the supply chain. So perhaps we are trying to improve all of the processes. We want to be able to respond faster, more efficiently, and more completely. But I guess to put it in a nutshell, all the infrastructure, and by the infrastructure, you're talking missing government employees. You're talking, and some of them are actually casualties. You have medical facilities that were totally destroyed, lack of power, lack of communication, food supplies located elsewhere in the country that have to be trucked in here or flown in here or brought on ships. Mobilizing all of this is really such a massive effort.
When you talked about the shortcomings of local authorities, are you suggesting that local governments were not sufficiently prepared?
That is a matter that's subject to investigation.
What is your feeling on that? You've been talking to people here.
I'd rather have the investigation finished before I accuse anybody of anything.
But ultimately, responsibility for this disaster lies with you.
Well, I'm the chief executive. Therefore, everything that happens, I ultimately resign to you. But if I may point out, if you look at the casualty figures, the overwhelming bulk of them happened in this region. And one has to ask, why this particular region? Why are some provinces, for instance, reporting zero casualties in terms of deaths? Or some of them are very, very minimal. But here, we're talking thousands already. What is the difference? And everyone basically given the same bits of knowledge and information. For instance, in terms of storm surges, we have a 36,000 kilometer coastline. You want to map every area and try to model, if a storm comes at this velocity, how does the contour of the area after the beaches look like, so that you would know the magnitude of storm surges and possibly their effects on the inland portions. That has to be handled also. A lot of relocating efforts also for informal centers, which is actually being undertaken already.
Last question, Mr. President. Just give us your sense of the devastation that you've seen and your feeling about it.
It'd be kind of hard to imagine. We're visited by 20 typhoons every year. But when you see very large trucks being turned over the sides, what looks like very sturdy buildings, probably constructed under the code that says 260 km/h winds, looking like they were blown up. Then, of course, like any other human being, one recognizes you cannot really challenge Mother Nature. But the overall questions with any casualty, under my watch especially, what we want to try and maintain is what more can we do to minimize the number one and the disruptive effects. That's why the National Disaster Risk Reduction Management Council has been constantly fine-tuning and improving its capabilities. And I think proof of that is, again, the disparity between what transpired in terms of casualties and several other regions that have reported very minimal.
But I mean, how does it make you feel, the devastation you've seen?
I cannot, one is tempted to despair. But the minute I despair, then everybody, it cascades down and everybody gets hampered in the efforts to get up. But today, especially, when you see the public market starting to open, when you see the power lines being assisted not just by the distribution company here, but others who were not affected. Well, we have a concept in the Philippines called Bayan, which is communities helping each other. It seems everybody has been really doing their share. For instance, our head of the Minister for Transport and Communication suddenly becomes the transport logistics hub, from getting the material from suppliers to the repacking centers to bringing them to where they're needed. Our Secretary of Labor, I've tasked to be the point person for all the donations, whether in kind, in cash, in physical services. So many of the members of the cabinet are actually undertaking more than their portfolio. Training, and everybody, I think, has really gotten up to the plate, and really, I'd like to think they're batting very close to 300.